The marketplace fell silent when she arrived. It was a Sunday morning in 1847 in a small plantation town in Mississippi. The streets were crowded with people, workers, merchants, families attending the weekly market. The church bells had just finished ringing. Everything was normal. Then Margaret Ashford appeared. She was the wife of Colonel James Ashford, one of the wealthiest plantation owners in the state. She was known for her composure, her restraint, her perfect adherence to the codes of Southern lady. She wore silk dresses. She hosted elegant dinners. But on this Sunday morning, she had something to say. She had arranged the event herself. She had invited people. She had orchestrated every detail. And when she stood in the center of the marketplace, when she raised her voice so that everyone could hear, the town understood that something was profoundly wrong. "My husband," she announced, "has dishonored this family. He has violated the sacred bonds of matrimony. And I have decided that the entire town should bear witness to his shame." By evening, Colonel James Ashford would be publicly humiliated, restrained in the town square for everyone to see, and whipped in front of his wife, his community, and the enslaved people whose flesh had been treated as less valuable than his own. By evening, the codes that had protected men of his station would be shattered, and a question would emerge that no one could answer. Does a woman have the right to humiliate a man so completely? And if so, what does that say about the society that permits it? Margaret Ashford learns the truth on a Tuesday afternoon. She has been visiting her sister in town, attending social functions, fulfilling her obligations as the wife of one of the most prominent men in Mississippi. The scene is unmistakable. Her husband, Colonel James Ashford, is in bed with 3 enslaved men. They understand, with the instinct born of living in constant fear, what this discovery means. They understand that they are about to become instruments of their own destruction. But Margaret's focus is on her husband. He is caught in a moment of complete vulnerability. He is naked. He is exposed. And in that moment, Margaret sees something that transforms her entire understanding of her marriage, her position, her life. She sees the truth. Colonel James Ashford is not the man she married. The man she married was a fiction, a performance created for public consumption. The real James Ashford is a man who has secrets, desires, shame that he has been hiding for years. The real James Ashford is not the respectable plantation owner, but something far more complicated, far more broken. For a moment, neither of them speaks. The moment stretches. In that silence, Margaret processes what she has discovered. She understands that her entire marriage has been constructed on a lie. She understands that the man she has devoted her life to has been living a double life. She understands that she has been made a fool, and something in her changes. Margaret does not react with hysteria. She does not collapse. She does not weep. Instead, she becomes very quiet. She becomes very still. And in that stillness, she begins to think. Her first instinct is shame. This discovery is shameful. It reflects on her. It makes her appear foolish. It undermines her position as a respectable woman. Every rule of Southern society says that she should hide this, deny this, protect her husband's reputation, and by extension, her own. But as she stands in the bedroom, looking at her husband's terrified face, Margaret realizes something else. She no longer cares about those rules. She cares about justice. Not the justice of the law, which would be useless in this situation, which would protect her husband because he is a man of property and standing. Not the justice of the church, which would counsel forgiveness and discretion, but a different kind of justice, the justice of revelation, the justice of public humiliation, the justice of making her husband experience a fraction of the shame that she is experiencing. In the days that follow the discovery, Margaret makes her plans carefully. She does not confront her husband. She does not demand explanations. She does not threaten him with exposure. Instead, she begins to arrange what will become the most scandalous event in the town's history. She speaks to prominent women in town. She tells them carefully selected details. She allows rumors to begin to circulate. She creates the expectation of revelation. And she announces, through careful channels, that she has something important to say to the entire community. She sets a date, Sunday, the marketplace. After the church service, she invites everyone. Colonel Ashford does not understand what is happening until it is too late. He suspects that Margaret knows something, but he does not realize the extent of her knowledge or her intentions. He assumes that if there is a confrontation, it will be private, handled according to the unspoken rules that govern such scandals among the respectable classes. He does not realize that Margaret has decided to break every rule. 10 years earlier, Margaret was a girl of 17, beautiful and well-educated, from a respectable but not wealthy family. James Ashford was a man of 30, handsome and charming, with the kind of wealth and position that seemed to promise everything. Their marriage was considered an excellent match. Margaret's family was elevated by the union. James acquired a wife who was beautiful, accomplished, refined. Everyone understood the arrangement as a success. Margaret entered into the marriage with the kind of innocence that young women of her class possessed. She believed in her husband. She believed in the romantic ideals that she had been taught. She believed that marriage was a partnership based on love and commitment. James, for the first few years, played his role perfectly. He was attentive to his wife. He complimented her. He included her in social events and community functions. He gave her a position of respect and honor in the society they inhabited. By all external measures, he was a good husband. But there were always small inconsistencies. There were evenings when he told Margaret he had business to attend to, and disappeared until late at night. There were moments when she caught him looking at men in ways that seemed different from how he looked at women. There were nights when he came to her room and made love with a kind of dutiful efficiency that suggested obligation rather than desire. Margaret attributed these things to the responsibilities of his position. She attributed them to the pressures of managing a large plantation. She attributed them to the strangeness of men, a category that she had been taught was fundamentally incomprehensible and unknowable. But over the years, as Margaret matured, as she became more aware of the world and of human nature, she began to understand that something was wrong. She began to suspect that there were secrets. She began to wonder what those secrets might be, but she did not investigate. She did not confront. She accepted her role as the wife, the hostess, the woman who managed the household and bore 2 children and maintained the facade of respectability. She accepted the position that society had given her. In doing so, she made a choice not to know. But the discovery in the bedroom shatters that choice. It forces her to know. It forces her to see clearly what she had been pretending not to see. And in that moment of forced clarity, Margaret understands that she has spent 10 years of her life married to a lie. In the days between the discovery and the planned revelation, Margaret transforms. Her husband attempts to control the situation. He tries to convince her to stay silent. He offers explanations, justifications, promises. He appeals to her sense of family honor. He reminds her of the children. He attempts every emotional manipulation that he can conceive. Margaret listens to none of it. She moves through the house like a woman possessed by a singular purpose. She speaks to people carefully. She allows information to spread. She does not need to tell the whole story. The rumor mill of a small southern town will do most of the work for her. She simply needs to provide enough information that people become curious, interested, invested in what will happen. She speaks to other women in town, women who, like her, have made the choice not to know about their husbands' indiscretions, their secrets, their hidden lives. Women who have accepted the position of the wife, the ornament, the respectable woman who asks no questions. Women who have, in accepting this position, accepted a kind of death of their own agency. Something in Margaret's words speaks to them. Something in her revelation awakens a recognition of their own buried rage their own suppressed knowledge of truths they have chosen not to acknowledge. They agree to attend the marketplace. They agree to bear witness. Margaret also makes arrangements with the constables. She has a plan. She has thought through every detail. She knows that what she is about to do will generate scandal, shock, possibly legal repercussions. But she also knows that she has the power to do it, and once this moment passes, she will never have this power again, so she uses it. The night before the revelation, Margaret does not sleep. She sits in her room and thinks about her marriage. She thinks about the 10 years she has devoted to a man who was not who she believed him to be. She thinks about the children she has borne. She thinks about the position she will lose, the respect she will forfeit, the way that society will judge her for what she is about to do. But she also thinks about justice. Not the justice that the law provides. The law has no mechanism to address what she is experiencing. Not the justice that society provides. Society would prefer that this scandal be hidden, that she remain silent, that she protect her husband's reputation at the cost of her own dignity. But a different kind of justice, the justice of revelation, the justice of making her husband experience exposure, vulnerability, shame, the same exposure and vulnerability that she is experiencing. In the early morning, as the sun rises over the plantation, Margaret makes a final decision. She will not be able to undo what she is about to do. Once she steps into that marketplace and speaks, her life will be changed forever. Her position in society will be compromised. Her future will be uncertain. But at least it will be honest. The marketplace on Sunday morning is crowded. Word has spread. People have heard rumors, whispers, suggestions of something momentous. By the time Margaret appears, there are perhaps 500 people gathered, women, men, children, enslaved and free. They are waiting to see what will happen. When Margaret speaks, when she announces what she has discovered, the silence that follows is absolute. She does not spare details. She does not soften the language. She speaks clearly and directly about what she found, what her husband has been doing, what this means about the man that society has respected and honored. The shock on her husband's face when he realizes what is happening is visible to everyone. He has come to the marketplace expecting a normal Sunday. He is not prepared for this revelation. He is not prepared to be exposed. Margaret has arranged for constables to apprehend him. The legal mechanism is thin under Southern law. What she is doing pushes the boundaries of what is acceptable. But the constables, perhaps because of the social pressure, perhaps because of their own sympathies, allow Margaret to proceed. Colonel James Ashford is stripped of his clothing. He is chained to a post in the center of the marketplace. He is placed on display, naked and vulnerable, before the entire community. And then he is whipped. The woman who performs the whipping is not hired. Is Margaret's choice to assign this task to one of the enslaved men who is found with her husband? The man hesitates. He understands that this act will have consequences. But he also understands that Margaret is offering him a kind of agency, a kind of power over the man who has held power over him. He takes the whip. The blows that follow are not gentle. They are not merciful. They are the blows of a man who understands, perhaps for the first time in his life, that he is permitted to hurt someone without consequence, that he is permitted to express his rage on another person's body without legal recourse. The crowd watches in silence. Some people are horrified. Some people are satisfied. Some people are transfixed by the spectacle of a powerful man reduced to screaming, to begging, to complete humiliation. By the time the whipping ends, Colonel James Ashford is barely conscious. He is bleeding. He is broken. He is a man who has been stripped of every pretense, every dignity, every facade of respectability. Margaret watches without expression. Margaret turns to address the crowd one final time. "Let this serve," she says, "as a reminder that no man is so respectable that he cannot be exposed. No man is so powerful that he cannot be humiliated. And no woman should be forced to maintain the fiction of respectability when that respectability is built on lies. The scandal spreads rapidly. The image of Colonel James Ashford, whipped in a public marketplace, becomes a symbol of something, though people disagree about what. For some, Margaret Ashford is a heroine. She is a woman who refused to accept the betrayal that society expected her to accept. She is a woman who took justice into her own hands when no legal mechanism existed to provide it. For others, Margaret is a dangerous woman. She has violated the codes that protect society. She has humiliated a man publicly. She has threatened the social order by suggesting that a woman has the right to humiliate, to expose, to exact revenge. The legal consequences are complicated. Colonel Ashford attempts to bring charges against his wife, but the charges are weak. He has difficulty articulating exactly what crime has been committed. He was not the one who arranged the conspiracy. The charges become increasingly desperate and increasingly difficult to sustain. Eventually, the legal cases are dismissed. Colonel Ashford receives no justice from the law, but the social consequences are profound and permanent. Colonel Ashford's reputation is destroyed. He is no longer respected in his community. He becomes, in effect, a social pariah, still wealthy, still technically powerful, but stripped of the respect that wealth and power usually confer. He eventually leaves Mississippi. He moves west, attempting to start a new life in a place where his shame is not known. But the shame follows him. The story precedes him. Wherever he goes, people know who he is, what was done to him, what this suggests about his character. Margaret, meanwhile, becomes a complicated figure in the public imagination. She is neither fully accepted nor fully rejected by respectable society. She has paid a price. Her marriage is effectively over. Her social position is compromised. Her future is uncertain. But she has also achieved something that few women achieve: agency, visibility, the power to control her own narrative. In the years following the scandal, Margaret becomes involved in early feminist causes. She writes letters that are published in newspapers. She speaks to groups of women about the rights of women in marriage, about the expectation that women should accept betrayal in silence, about the possibility of female agency and power. Some of what she says is controversial. Some of what she advocates for is decades ahead of her time. But all of it emerges from the clarity that came to her on the day she discovered her husband's betrayal, the clarity that the old rules no longer apply. Margaret Ashford lives another 40 years after the scandal. She never remarries. She eventually purchases a small house in a town far from Mississippi, in a place where she is known as an educated woman with unconventional views, rather than as a woman who humiliated her husband. She writes. She advocates for women's rights. She becomes, in her later years, a figure of some prominence in early feminist circles. But she never fully escapes the scandal. It follows her through her life. It defines her. Every biographical entry, every mention of her name, includes the reference to the marketplace, the whipping, the humiliation of Colonel Ashford. Some people see this as her legacy, a woman who refused to accept betrayal. Others see it as the act that defines and limits her, a woman whose entire life is understood through the lens of her revenge. Margaret herself, in letters and journals written late in her life, seems to struggle with the question of whether what she did was right. She writes, "I freed myself from the prison of respectability, but I also sacrificed everything else. My children, my position, my future, all of it was built on the expectation of respectability, and when I destroyed that, I destroyed everything else as well. Was the price worth it? I cannot answer that question. I can only say that I no longer live the life that society demanded of me, and I no longer believe that I should have had to." In the decades following the scandal, the question it raises becomes increasingly relevant as society begins to evolve. As women begin to demand the right to control their own lives, to have recourse when betrayed, Margaret's act is revisited and reinterpreted in each era. In the late 19th century, she is seen as a victim who took control of her own story. In the early 20th century, she is seen as a proto-feminist who challenged male authority. In the late 20th century, she is seen as a woman whose act, while understandable, raises complicated questions about the nature of justice, the right to humiliate, the difference between accountability and revenge. The question that her story raises is never fully answered. Does a wronged person have the right to humiliate the one who wronged them? And if so, where is the line between justice and cruelty? Colonel Ashford, for his part, eventually returns to Mississippi. He attempts to rebuild his life. He remarries to a woman from outside the state who knows nothing of the scandal. He eventually achieves a kind of respectability, though it is always shadowed by the knowledge of what happened. He dies in 1875, and his obituary makes no mention of the scandal, no mention of the marketplace, no mention of the day that he was exposed before his entire community. The scandal is erased from the official record, buried beneath respectability and time. But it is not forgotten. In the town where it occurred, in the marketplace where it happened, the story persists as oral tradition, as folklore, as the kind of narrative that people tell to each other as a way of understanding the possibilities and dangers of power, of betrayal, of revenge. And the question that Margaret's act raises the question of whether a woman has the right to humiliate a man, of what justice looks like when the law cannot provide it, of what happens when someone refuses to accept the position assigned to them, continues to echo through time, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. In 1870, Margaret Ashford receives a letter from a young woman she has never met. The letter is addressed to her care of a newspaper editor who has published some of her writings. The young woman, her name is Eleanor, writes to tell Margaret that she has read about the scandal, that she has read Margaret's essays, that Margaret's refusal to accept betrayal in silence has inspired her. Eleanor writes, "I read about what you did, and I understood that I do not have to accept what society tells me to accept. I do not have to remain silent. I do not have to protect a man who has betrayed me. Because of you, I found the courage to leave my husband, to live alone, to build a life on my own terms. I do not know if what you did was right or wrong, but I know that it changed what is possible for women like me." Margaret receives dozens of similar letters in the years following her public statement. Women write to her describing situations similar to her own betrayal, humiliation, the necessity of maintaining appearances despite unbearable circumstances. Women write to ask her how she found the courage to speak. Women write to tell her that her action gave them permission to act. In responding to these letters, Margaret begins to understand that her scandal has had a consequence that extends far beyond her own life. She has, without intending to, provided a model. She has shown that it is possible to refuse to accept the position assigned by society. She has shown that a woman can take power, can exact accountability, can shape her own narrative. Whether this is justice or cruelty, whether it is right or wrong, these questions remain unanswered. But the possibility that Margaret opened up, the possibility of female agency, of female power, of the right to refuse silence, continues to ripple forward through time. And in the letters she receives from women finding their own voices, finding their own agency, finding their own power to challenge the systems that constrain them, Margaret sees the true legacy of what she did. Not revenge, but revolution.